Former President Trump in a rage after an Associated Press investigation finds just 182 cases of potential voter fraud out of the more than 3 million Arizona ballots cast in last year's presidential election. When Fox News mentioned the findings, Trump responded, and we put this up on screen. Fox News and other media outlets incorrectly side with the outdated and terrible Maricopa County Election Board to report no fraud found in the presidential election. They spew the gross misinformation purposefully put out by the county and the Associated Press. Just as a reminder, Trump lost Arizona by nearly 11,000 votes, fair and square. And here to discuss it is Republican strategist and CNN political commentator Alice Stewart and former Fox News politics editor Chris Stirewalt. Chris, you might recall you were the one who led the Fox decision desk to call Arizona for Biden on election night. Most other outlets, including CNN, waited 9 days to make the call. You ultimately were fired by Fox.
That is true.
Do you still defend the decision to call Arizona when you did for Arizona, for Biden? And what do you make of, what we've been hearing from the former president, what's happening out in Arizona right now? You must have a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, the first thing is I didn't lead it. Bill Salmon, my boss, led it. Yeah. And there were many great nerds, my fellow nerds, who we were the best decision desk in the business for 10 years.
We have a great one here, too, but I think ours is the best.
No question, and I love Harry Enton, and much love for my friend Harry, but we were the best. And the call in Arizona was, I've heard it described a lot of different ways, but what it ultimately was accurate, and what it ultimately was first. And I understand why Donald Trump's experience with the Arizona call was difficult for him, because it disrupted a narrative that he was trying to put into place that night. They were going to claim victory, and you remember he gave this sort of a dirge of a victory speech on election night in the Brady Room. Came out and said, "We've won." But when he said "we won," there were one of the 5 key states. There were 5 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, that everyone was watching the most closely, that you were watching, that your decision desk was watching, that mattered the most. And when we flipped Arizona red to blue, that meant that Trump was hit under the waterline, right? That if he didn't have
This wasn't just one of those blue wall states going.
No, this was a big flip.
Yeah.
And that meant that he would definitely need Pennsylvania, and he looked far away from home in Pennsylvania. So I understand why Trump was angry about Arizona, and I understand why he was angry about the call, because it disrupted a narrative that he wanted to put in place so that he could steal the election.
And our reporting was, at the time, that Trump or his people or both were burning up the phone lines to Fox executives, Rupert Murdoch, the Murdoch family, and so on, to try to change this call that you made, that your team made. Did you pick up on any of that? Were you involved in any of those discussions?
You can't pay attention to what partisans say on election night. They're mad. When they lose, they're mad. Yeah. So I was not unfamiliar with that. What was unfamiliar, and this is different, and this is the question for the Republican Party going forward, there were so many people, and I can think of Kevin McCarthy, I can think of Steve Scalise, I can think of Ted Cruz, a bunch of Republicans that went along with the scam that followed after that, and that genuinely surprised me. What happened in the days and weeks leading up to January 6th after that was truly shocking to me. And I have a low opinion of humanity. And what they did and how they acted to try to help Trump and abet Trump in this stuff when they knew better was genuinely surprising to me. If the Republican Party can't acknowledge that they lost the 2020 presidential election, and move on to do the things that they have to do in order to win in 2024, this will be a boat anchor around their necks for a decade to come.
And it's going to make it even more maddening for election teams that you used to work on to call these kinds of races, Alice. I mean, the GOP is still not done with this paranoid delusion that they can upend the Arizona results.
No, and it probably won't ever happen. Let me just say this about Chris Stirewalt. Don't be mistaken by his lighthearted demeanor and his good nature. If he says something, it is factually accurate. If he gives you a result of an election, you can take that to the bank. And I think that's really important to know. He probably didn't like to say the results of those elections simply because of, the narrative that was going on at the time. But if he says it is true. And you can look at Arizona, and clearly this was a state that the Trump campaign thought they were going to win. But you have to look at the bigger picture. When we're looking at questions of the election integrity across the board, Trump, Giuliani, and that team has brought legal challenges to the election results over 60 times to no avail. And now what we're seeing in Arizona and also some in Georgia and Pennsylvania, we're seeing audits and we're seeing new inquiries, but that is not going to end result, and it's not going to be a new result because these are still the same numbers that we saw on election night and in the days and weeks to follow.
And Chris, I have to ask you what you make of this so-called audit that is happening in Arizona right now, this quest for bamboo ballots and so on. As somebody who has called elections every 4 years, how nutty is this?
Well, the first thing let me say is I love your heart, Alice Stewart.
Oh,
but the truth is that this is a dangerous delusion for Republicans. They're sucking up to their base to try to give them the things that they want. So in Texas currently, they have a piece of legislation that wouldn't do anything. Turnout doesn't have a partisan opinion. High turnout elections can favor Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are working on this legislation, doing these audits, doing this other stuff. Why? Because they want to suck up to their base and folks in their base who think the election was stolen. That doesn't help Republicans with the voters who they need. The Pew Research Center's recent comprehensive work on what happened in the 2020 election. How did Republicans lose the election? They got crushed in the suburbs. Joe Biden's numbers in the suburbs went up by 11 points over Hillary Clinton. It was a big defeat. How does a party that is struggling with embracing vaccines, how does a party that is struggling with how to talk to these very voters, talking about this stuff is toxic. This is a poison, and it reinforces. The way the Republican Party lost the Senate was by these shenanigans, this foolishness in Georgia. 2 Senate seats, they lost them. They deserve to lose them. If they can't get over this and get through it, they'll lose again.
And Alice, Chris mentioned vaccine misinformation. President Biden going after Facebook, saying that they're killing people. What do you think of that?
Look, I think we need to take the politics out of this pandemic and realize this is a health issue, this is a health care issue, and we should, from the very beginning, the masks should not have been political. They should have just been taken as our health experts told us to do. And I think it's really important that we stick to the facts here. And what our health experts are saying is that not only if you get a vaccine does it help you in terms of your health, you also don't have to wear a mask. And a lot of people don't like to wear masks. And I spoke with living in Arkansas for many years, there's the question about a lot of these red states that have discouraged people from mask wearing and vaccines. But there's also another notion that's going on. I talked with Mayor Frank Scott in Little Rock today, and he says we need to get the message out, not just to Republican voters, but to rural people in the rural areas of this country who are hesitant for vaccines, just from the standpoint of they don't like the government to tell them what to do, and Black Americans are concerned about the history with vaccines. So we need to just educate people, Republican and Democrat, about the safety of getting a vaccine.
And Chris, I have to ask you before I let you go. Every night on Fox, your former employer, there are hosts, Tucker Carlson first among them, night after night, spreading misinformation and fear about COVID vaccines. Is he killing people? Are they killing people?
Well, I would put it this way: they're chasing, they're pandering. Poor people with low.
Because you worked at Fox, and you know what were they doing?
Well,
what is going on?
I wasn't over there.
You weren't. You weren't part of that team,
I wasn't on the opinion side, but I can tell you this: who are the people in America who have the lowest vaccine acceptance rate? It is poor people with low educational attainment levels. And it is, yes, a lot of red states and a lot of Republicans, but it's also a lot of African Americans, it's a lot of Black and brown people, it's people of color. So this is the reality. What people who are doing this stuff, Ron Johnson, a senator from Wisconsin, is engaging in similar behavior as you described. They're pandering, they're not turning people. Yes, they're making it worse, and people should get vaccinated, but they're not powerful here. They're pandering, and that's the sad part.